Bad takes by social media apologists. Frank Turek said the purpose of miracles is for them to occur rarely so that they do get our attention as special acts of God's. Wendell said, there are no fossils that are millions of years old because the Earth is only around 6,000 years old. Eric Hovind said, archaeological evidence has proven the Bible to be true over and over again. Archaeological evidence is just one of the many things that show how accurate the Bible is. These are all people that I have tried to engage with. These are all people who have ignored time and time again my calling them out on their social media accounts. Well, now I'm putting it out there for the entire world, for every apologist. Do you think you have enough faith to call Talk Heathen and present your arguments for God existing to the world? I don't. I think you'll cower and hide behind your post and run social media accounts like you always do. Whether you are an atheist who finds their claims funny or a theist who finds their arguments compelling, reach out to the internet post and run apologists and get them to call the show today, because it is starting right now. Welcome to Talk Heathen. Today is Sunday, October the 8th, 2023. I am your host, Richard Gilliver, and today joining me is a very wonderful, my old friend, Secular Rarity. How are you, SR?
I'm great, man. I'm excited to be back on Talk Heathen. It's been a minute, and I'm really glad to be here with you because we haven't gotten to hang out as much lately. And there's been some rumors going around online as to why that is, and I just want to put them to bed. Okay, it's not because Richard and I are busy or anything. It's literally because we have a personal dispute. It's a very, very old rivalry that goes back. I honestly don't even remember what exactly started it, but at this point, I just don't think either of us will apologize. So, we've put it aside for this, this short time so that we can, talk about some apologetic arguments and how bad they are. But the moment the cameras are off, folks, be assured we will go back to it. So
we'll ignoring each other, fisticuffs, all that kind of thing.
Right. That's right. I'm getting a plane ticket across the pond just to whoop that. Anyway, no, I'm great, man. I'm excited to be here. So,
Talk Heathen is a product of the that and the atheist community of Austin, a 501c3 non-profit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. Talk Heathen is a live call-in show, and we have open lines. So get your calls in at 512-991-9242 or from your computer at tiny.cc/callth. And before we get started, we want to give you last week's results of Talk Heathen to Me. Last week, we asked you to caption our caption contest. So number 3 was David Dickey. Dan is pointing out the UFO that Sophia can't see. Secular, what did you think of that one?
Yeah, it does. She looks pensive. And Dan looks very matter of fact. I think that is pretty spot on, Dan, he sees all kinds of things, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoots, or big feet, I guess anyway. Yeah, great caption.
Yeah, you just took me back to the Lord of the Rings and big feet. Number 2 is Dark Side of All Trades, says Dan. I karate chop your arguments for Jesus and Sophia. Consider your arguments chopped.
Yeah, I think that I think there is a lot of history to show that karate is the number one way to break down anybody's bad arguments. So good job, Dan.
Absolutely. Chuck Norris, eat your heart out. Number 1, talking about Chuck Gados says, Captain, you heard it here first. The sound of one hand clapping, keeping with the Eastern theme there.
I've always wondered what that sound was, because I hear it every so often, so it's good to finally, it's like when you hear like a beep in the, somewhere in your house and you're like, is it a smoke detector? Is it a fridge? Like, what's going on? Where is it coming from? It's good to know. It's good to know.
I think the sound of one hand clapping is whoosh. as it flies past your face.
Oh,
The prompt for next week is wrong answers only. Why did God really flood the earth? Enter your best answer below the video in the comments, and next week we will reveal the top 3 answers. But I need to ask you, SR, what wrong answers only? Why did God really flood the earth?
Yeah, most people don't know this because the story has been corrupted over the years. But actually, a toilet overflowed in heaven. It was just a total mistake, and then God just kind of rolled with it. And he was just like, yeah, I did that because you guys were like sinning a lot or whatever, you know. But yeah, it was actually just a plumbing error. So hard to find good plumbers in heaven, apparently.
Like that video takeaway for today. That it's hard to find plumbers in heaven. If you take anything away from today's show, let that be it. Without any further ado, let's go across to the people who make this happen. And there are some wonderful people behind this. We've got show note writers, call screeners, all those kind of people. But of course, we want to see the crew. Let's go over to them and look at Crew Cam, see who makes this show really well. Look at those beautiful people. Love them all, especially Crew Cat. Crew Cat is the favorite. Well, we've got, in addition, we've got a crew dog now. It doesn't appear on screen, but we do have a crew dog as well. We're expanding our arc of crew animals, which I think is
we need really 2 of each kind. I mean, that's the.
we do have calls waiting, but before we go to those calls, I want to have a little bit of a rant because I've come across recently lots and lots, as I said in the intro, of these kind of apologists who were coming out and making statements on social media. Now, we had a call, long-term listeners might remember, a couple of years ago, we had a call regarding the rape apologetics. And coming up with the kind of, in a lot of these verses, the words, the particular word, rape was not used. And so therefore, it means that it wasn't excusing rape. It wasn't given license to kind of rape, which is kind of not very good. And I came across this, someone else, I came across this recently from someone else and on the old Twitter. And they said pretty much the same thing. Well, there was no word for rape in the Old Testament. So therefore, it cannot mean rape. Now, this infuriates me. So kind of what I did is I did that, I dealt with it as kind. I presented a paper which had been written. So this person could actually go and have a look at that. And as is often the case when you actually present evidence of something, these people run a mile and don't engage with you. But there is actually a paper for all those interested who've come across this apologetic themselves and are wondering, well, I wonder how to respond to that. Because in actual fact, there is no word for rape in the ancient Hebrew tongue. So they're right on that point. However, in the Journal for the Study of the Old Testament, volume 28, issue 3, there is a paper, you can find this online, which is called Reading Rape in the Hebrew Bible, a consideration of language. And what that paper goes into is it goes into the details surrounding those texts in the Bible which use that word. It goes into it a lot. It goes into the context, and it actually establishes that, well, in actual fact, the word, the way we use that word, is applicable to many of those texts in the Old Testament. And this really poor apologetic that just because the word specifically itself was not there in Hebrew, that there was no Hebrew equivalent to the direct word, is kind of silly to me. It's a bit silly when you have to go to the extent of actually writing a scientific paper to show that these people are wrong. But certainly go up and have a look at that paper, because it is really, really important. It's to this apologetic where people are kind of, these apologists are coming up with, they have such bad arguments that they have to come up with, well, the word itself wasn't used, so therefore that's it. That's the be all and end all, the conclusion, and that's where I'm sitting my stool. Come on, apologists do better than that. SR, have you got anything to say on that before we take the first call?
Absolutely, because I've heard that myself, and it's frustrating because one of the big things that kind of language is trying to do, right, is it's trying to take an abstract concept and put it into something that's a little bit easier for us to grasp, right? It's kind of like the same thing with a standard currency, right? It's like, instead of us going through this whole I'll trade you 3 goats so that you can give me this basket, we just decide that this other thing has some value, and we go from there. But so, like, with words, we can have a concept that's conveyed but never use the word that actually we're defining here. And funny enough, the word still applies, you guys. I heard this most recently with abortion in the Bible, where somebody was basically saying, no, there's no abortion ever. No, there's definitely not God-sanctioned abortion. But of course, there's the story of the bitter water that the woman is forced to drink, right?
Yeah.
By the way, forced to drink just because her husband suspects she's cheated, right? And the person kept saying, like, oh, well, yeah, but it doesn't say abortion. It's like, it doesn't say abortion. And it's like, yeah, but it's clearly terminating the pregnancy, right, man? And if that's what we mean by that word, well, then it's there, dude. Like, it's in there. You say whatever words you want, but this concept that we're expressing when we say rape, when we say murder, when we say abortion, like, these are all throughout the Bible, and they are sanctioned by God. God gives you specific means as to how to go about them. I also, real quick, would just, point out that, potentially one reason that the ancient Hebrew language doesn't exactly have that same word that we do in the modern English language may have something to do with the common thought that women just didn't have any consent anyway. Like, maybe it was just because they never freaking cared about that. And so trying to define a word where somebody has sex with somebody non-consensually just doesn't make sense, because that didn't exist, right? So yeah, I think just once again, a really good example of the crap apologetics you were talking about in the opening. And hopefully somebody will call us and talk with us about these. Like, if you honestly believe that there's not slavery in the Bible, if you believe there's not abortion, if you don't think there's rape in the Bible, like, call us and tell us your best understanding of it. Because Richard and I have definitely read those passages once or twice, and we flat out disagree. So,
absolutely. With all that said, let's take our first call. VonZoom from Ohio wants to discuss the fine-tuning argument. VonZoom, you watched the pre-show TikTok and you've called the show. So what is it exactly you'd like to discuss?
Yeah.
So as a former apologist, now an atheist, one of the big things I did during my deconstruction was knock down the arguments that I was proposing to people, and I was saying that was true. And I realized I was only accepting them because they almost sounded logically sound, but it justified the feeling of faith that I had. But I also realized, just real quick, that apologetics has nothing to do with us, me and the two of you. Like, it has nothing to do with us. It has nothing to do with getting getting an unbeliever to believe. It has everything to do with keeping believers believing.
Yeah. It's a defense of the faith, right? So it's a defensive move as opposed to an offensive move. Totally agree.
Right. So you're in the situation where you have required beliefs, prohibited beliefs. So therefore, you can never be wrong about what you believe. So all these arguments is giant circles. But the one argument that still trips me up is the fine-tuning argument, because what I've heard Christians say to me is, well, there's the way the speed of light is, and the Hubble constant, the flatness of the universe, the way the chaotic nature of the universe, and there's still life. Like, I don't have a answer for that. Like, 'cause to them for them they're saying that looks like architecture from a conscious mind.
I think that's a good place to start, VonZoom, because the fine-tuning argument is almost always expressed as fine-tuning for life, specifically.
Right.
If you're just doing this argument of, well, all of existence is fine-tuned for existence, it kind of defeats itself, because it's like, well, yeah, either existence met specific criteria to allow stuff to exist or it didn't, so if it's here, then it must have met that criteria. But the fine-tuning for life bit is where I think it really is like, okay, we can't argue this anymore. We can't have this discussion, because what you're arguing is that somehow the tiniest of dots in a sea of vast nothingness is fine-tuned for life. Are you kidding me? Are you telling me that the solar system couldn't be slightly better for life? 1% better for life? It couldn't be? That doesn't make any sense. And I don't know how I don't even know how you would determine that, right?
The way it's portrayed to me now is that it's not necessarily that, like, the Earth, they're saying that the Earth is fine-tuned for just us to exist, as in that gives a reason that, maybe we're created beings or things are different here. And that's why the rest of the universe is so different, or that's what makes us so special. It's like that's the angle that they come at.
That's fair, but then think about it from the question of just Earth. Like, we don't have to look at it from the question of the universe or the solar system. Just ask yourself the question, or ask them the question, are you legitimately telling me that the way that the Earth exists right now on October 8th, 2023, is the absolute best it could be in terms of life existing? And if you can both agree that you could make the Earth even 1% better, well, then it's currently not fine-tuned for life, is it? Because it could actually be better, right?
Like, because the big thing that I always think to, or my mind always goes to when I hear like fine-tuned for life, I'm like, I'm pretty sure this planet is a death trap. I'm pretty sure I've heard 99% of all the species on the planet that's ever existed doesn't exist anymore. So it's like, I'm not seeing that doesn't seem like fine tuning.
Right.
Like that'd be my one go-to for not fine tuned, but
especially
like,
if you,
the idea of like maybe, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off, but especially if you accept the age of the Earth, right? Like 4 some odd billion years old, then it's like, wow, like you're legitimately telling me that for humans to exist, the Earth had to have dinosaurs roam and conquer the world for like 1 billion years and then die off, and and it's like, I guess somebody could say, yeah, but then we wouldn't have gasoline and stuff, and it's like, yeah, but again, you're telling me that there's not an even slightly better source of fuel out there than gasoline and fossil fuels. We know there is. We absolutely know there is. So there's no reason that we had to have 1 billion years of dinosaurs existing, right? So if you're taking that old Earth stance with it, right, with a creationist or a believer, then again, it just seems really easy to break that down. If you take the young Earth side, though, then we just go back to the thing we said a minute ago, which is, okay, like, sure, let's just grant this totally unfounded claim that the Earth was made 6,000 years ago, Adam and Eve in the garden. Cool. Sure. Again, you're legitimately telling me that the Earth couldn't be 1% better for making life happen. And if you honestly believe that, then I kind of don't even know where to go from there, because like that's kind of what we're all doing. Seemingly everybody seems to present this idea of, we just want to make the world a better place. And it's like, well, if that's what you think, then it can't be fine-tuned again,
But what would you have to say to the fine-tuning of like a bigger architecture to the universe?
But is there? This
Like
is the thing.
like,
The way I'd respond to this, the way I'd respond to this is by saying, look, there seems to be 2 options. We either have this one universe, which is fine-tuned, or we have this one universe, should I say, or we have multiple universes that we're not yet aware of. Now, if we have multiple universes, the fact that we are in this universe which has allowed life to come about is kind of the puddle argument. The fact that, this puddle is perfectly made for me. Who was it who first came up with that? I can't remember his name. The guy who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Douglas
Adams.
That one.
Douglas Adams, who came up with the puddle analogy. If there are multiple universes, this one just happens to be the one that is the one that life has come up in, and I am life, so it seems like it is purposefully made for me, and that just seems silly. And the argument itself is fine, but it's saying that from the apologist aspect that this is specifically made for you in this vast sea of many universes is just a silly argument. And the other kind of thing is, this may be the sum of everything. This universe may be all that is, or this cosmos may be all that there is. And how are you getting from that to, it's specifically made for life to occur? Because as far as we know, we are the only example of life in that vast universe. And that does not seem like something that is fine-tuned for the purpose, which is really important, of life occurring. So, it seems to be the exact opposite of what we're saying, if this is the one and only universe we've got.
Yeah.
If they're talking on the grand cosmic scale, that the universe is fine-tuned for life, it doesn't appear to be that way at all. It appears to be quite the opposite.
But what would you say if someone brings up the idea of like NASA or people with the James Webb, or, looking at planets that could harbor life, and what if it's showing that life is a lot more common than we thought? Like, would that be an argument?
But even then, it's still not fine-tuned for life. When someone says a universe is fine-tuned for life, that would suggest to me that at least in every solar system, if not on every single planet that forms, life should be there. That is not what we see, even if we take our own universe into account. I forget the figure of I've read a few papers on this, and I forget the exact figure, but I think the kind of figure thrown around is somewhere in about 30% that life occurs on, potentially could occur on planets that form in the universe. I think that's right. Please correct me, people, if I'm wrong on that, because I do forget the exact figure. But this is not an example of a universe which is fine-tuned for life. If only 30% of planets that form have life on them, then that is not fine-tuning. That's quite the opposite. That's well within the bounds of something not being fine-tuned and these things occurring naturally. And you said earlier about the kind of the cosmological constant and things like that, and the speed of light, but these things are always being refined. To me, if somebody is using that argument, let's say the kind of the cosmological constant and the age of the universe, if people are using that argument, they need to point specifically to why that particular number means something and why that particular number is important. You can't just hand wave away and say, well, the cosmological constant is evidence of fine-tuning, because it's something that's constantly being refined. And, even the way we've worked it out, we've got we've got the WMAP probe, if I remember rightly, and the Planck probe, which are the two main kind of things that give us the number we have for the cosmological constant. And they give us slightly different numbers, but they are in similar kind of ranges. I think I don't know which one's which. I think the Planck one says it's something like 13.82 or 13.83 billion years old. WMAP says it's 13.8 billion years old. So they're very, very close, and they're using different kind of techniques. But they have given us different numbers, and the numbers are constantly being refined. So if you're a religious apologist and you're saying, well, the cosmological constant is evidence that the universe is being fine-tuned, you have to show specifically why that particular number you are citing gives that information. You can't just simply give a hand wave, comment that, well, this shows fine tuning. You have to demonstrate why.
So the way it is explained to me, and this is the way I used to explain it also, is if you change any of those constants, even a little bit, everything wouldn't be as it is. Like that's the argument they use. That's why they say it points to like a architect.
Yeah, Vaughn. So I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you said that, because if you didn't, I was about to bring that up, because that's how I often hear it too, where basically somebody says like, hey, the whole universe is constructed in this way, and if you take any little piece of it and you alter it even by the slightest degree, but keep everything else the same, like it doesn't work. And it's like, well, yeah, of course, that makes sense. So think about it from this. Think about it. But hang on, Vaughn. So think about it from this perspective. Imagine walking up to a building and somebody looking at that building and looking at you and saying, if you changed one slight aspect about the architecture of this building and kept everything else the same, it would just crumble. And it's like, well, yeah, because it requires all of the current construction that we're looking at of this building requires all of these pieces to be in place. And then you ask the question, but could the building have been built differently from the beginning? Because that's actually what we're talking about. We're not talking about if the current instantiation of the universe had some slightly different property than what we know now, how would that affect things? That's not what we're talking about. We're actually building the building from the ground up. We don't have anything in front of us. This is a blank screen, and we are drawing the blueprints right now. And so if that's the case, then the argument of, well, if you just adjust one thing in a tiny way, it makes everything wrong. It's like that goes out the window, because now we can adjust absolutely everything completely at will. And if we can do that, again, because that's the crux of the argument, then the idea of this being the only possibility, again, just goes out the window, man, because it's not us just taking floors out of a building. We're literally rebuilding the building, man. So does that kind of help a little with that?
It does, because for me also in my discussions, the big thing that I always push back with is, okay, so say you're saying if we changed any of the constants, like shit would collapse. Okay, I get that. But then how are miracles possible if you're actually talking about breaking those laws?
Yeah. And that's a great point too, because the baggage that claim brings with it is stuff like that, is exactly that. Miracles are a suspension of seemingly the laws and constants of the universe. But by your argument here with fine tuning, miracles could never occur, which might actually then ultimately defeat itself if the creation of the universe by God is a miracle, right? So yeah, I mean that's an absolutely great point, man.
All right, and I don't want to take up any more of your guys' time. I just wanted a little bit of help with that, and you guys are amazing, and I appreciate everything that you do, and thank you for having me.
Hey, thanks so much, man.
Absolutely, VonZoom. Thank you for calling. We really appreciate it. This is a something that I find really interesting. SR, these arguments that are kind of put out there, the fine tuning arguments, etc. I just find them really, really bizarre, and it's for me, it all comes down to these are hand wave arguments, and I know you touched on that a little bit in what I was saying, but there's never any explanation given to them. It's like, oh, the universe is fine-tuned, and it always seems to come down to, well, we're here. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That an argument does not make, unfortunately. Just simply claiming that we're here, therefore the universe is fine-tuned. The universe is the way it is. And there's lots of work in cosmology now. There's lots of ideas. There's lots of different theories about there may be multiple universes. And that in itself is a conversation on its own. because the multiple universes don't necessarily mean that we are one universe and there's another one next to us and another one next to us. There can be multiple universes within cosmology, within our own universe. The whole thing is very, very fascinating. But it's all of this stuff. What me and you and the last caller would probably call the science is usually vastly overlooked in these conversations. And I've had occasion to speak to actual cosmologists who are religious and who believe God did design the universe and designed it perfectly. And my question to them is, on every occasion, is, where is your work? You have great work in the field of cosmology. And they are the really good cosmologists, a lot of these people. But where is the work demonstrating your belief that God has fine-tuned the universe? Where is that in the scientific journals? Because you seem to talk about it a lot, and you do this great work in the field of cosmology, but you never seem to actually do the work that shows that God created the universe and fine-tuned it. Why isn't that there if it's so obvious to you?
Weird how that's the case, It's like all of these other fields, like, electronics or medicine or psychology, cosmology, all of these other fields seem to make predictions and then find data to back up those predictions. Theology never seems to do that, and it's weird. It's strange. It's like the the Sesame Street. Which one of these is not like the other? It's like that one's not updating with new information. It seems again, it seems like there's a lot of different problems with the fine tuning. Because one thing I always wonder is, are religious people that believe in the fine tuning, are they saying that God was forced to make the universe this way? Like, could God actually make the universe any other way? Are you limiting your God like that? Because then that's just strange to me, how then you're then later on adding on all these attributes that make your God more capable than what you seem to agree with, right? It's confusing, and it just kind of eats its own self there. But yeah, I mean, it's a fun argument, I guess. We
have more announcements, but we're not going to go into them. We're going to go straight into another call, because unfortunately, if long-time fans will know that myself and SR can talk for hours without even callers being present. So we'll bring a caller in, and it's an old and a favorite, Otari from Georgia, who wants to talk about the problem of evil actually being a problem for atheism. Otari, what have you got for us this week?
Hello. So I was thinking the other day, and it hit me. I think that problem of evil is actually problem for atheism, because you don't think that there's anything inherently wrong with humans, right?
No, that's not necessarily the case. I think we should start we should start on the same foot here, Otari. So when I talk about the problem of evil, what I'm pretty much always referring to, what I generally hear most everybody else talking about, is how is there evil in a world with an all good God? So that doesn't apply to somebody who, doesn't believe in a God, right? So the problem of evil is a specific problem for a specific type of theist.
Yeah, I guess I made up a new problem of evil, but for non-believers.
But this is what I'm saying is you made a claim about the morality, quote unquote, the morality of atheism, but that just doesn't exist. There is no morality of atheism, because it's not inherent in the understanding of what atheism is, right? It's the religious side that tries to have one answer for 20 disparate questions. The atheist is just answering one question: do you believe in a God? No. And it's like, oh, cool. And then it's like, well, where do you ground your morality? And it's like, oh, cool, we're changing the conversation and we're having a completely different discussion. There are atheists who believe that there are objective morals, right? They say that they're just basically the same thing as like gravity. Like it's just a law of the universe. We just haven't discovered it yet, right? We know dark matter's a thing. We know dark matter interacts with stuff, you know. We didn't know about the Higgs boson for a while. We talked about it, weren't sure, finally found it, you know. So like it could be, morality could be something in that vein, according to some people, but it also could just not exist at all. And it's just a social thing that we just all kind of more or less agree to, you know. There's a bunch of different constructions. So again, this definitely doesn't apply to all people that take the label of atheist. And I would just argue that it actually doesn't apply at all, because it only applies to a really specific group of God believers. Like most of the friends that I have that are religious, if I talk to them about the problem of evil, it actually isn't it isn't a problem for them, because their view of God is not this version of God that has like all goodness and is the very essence of good in the world. And if that's not the case, then the problem of evil doesn't even apply to your God.
Anyway,
Does that clarify a bit?
let me ask you something.
Atari, let me just
Can I ask
interrupt
you
there,
something?
because you know SR has just given you a quite lengthy response,
Yeah.
and you kind of hand waved it away by just
literally
coming
said
back on and
anyway.
saying, "Well, anyway." Right. So I'm going to. I don't usually do this, Atari. You're very
I'm
privileged.
sorry, but it was
Atari.
what I
Just
was
give me a
talking about.
second. You're very, very privileged, Atari, because I'm usually very, very diplomatic to kind of problem callers. And like when I say problem callers, I mean people who come up with things that aren't really arguments, usually statements, which is what you usually do. But you caught me out. I'm going to do this, and I apologize to everybody who usually sees nice Richard, but I'm going to be knobhead Richard today. And you know, this is because Atari phones quite a lot, and you know, things are explained to him exactly as SR has done quite regularly. And then he just seems to completely ignore, just as he's just done with SR, what they say. So you started this phone call with, "I have been thinking." I've yet to see any fucking demonstration, Atari, that you are capable of thinking. Because every time anybody responds to you with something, knocks down your arguments, which we do frequently on this show, absolutely demolishes the bullshit that you come out with. You go away and then you come back week after week with the same crap. You don't seem to do any thinking whatsoever. So please respond to SR rather than hand waving him away, and respond to the comment that he has just made in response to you.
Well, what he said was irrelevant. I guess I didn't make good argument, but I can restate the question.
Sure.
So
restate the question.
do you believe that we are different from animals, and that we can commit evil by our free will?
So I don't believe free will is a thing. So I just already have a problem with the question.
Choose evil? Do you believe that you can choose evil?
Again, I don't think free will is a thing.
I don't think evil is a thing. Unless
I
you're
don't
using
either.
it in a colloquial form.
Yeah, it's a description. It's not a tangible existing thing. It's a description. Good and evil are labels that we apply to actions based on, you know, shared principles, right? Okay. And my argument on this is that everybody is actually using the same system. We're just not all applying it to the degree that to its fullest extent, right? So every moral system that I have ever come across in my life, this is just me saying this, right? Has always used the concept of well-being, even if it wasn't codified, even if they didn't use that terminology, just like Richard and I were talking about earlier, right? Words are just used to, you know, help define abstract concepts. And so every moral system I have ever come across, every person I have ever come across that talks about good and evil, right and wrong, morality, ethics, and so forth, they're all using well-being as a part of their system. And if you're using well-being as a part of your system, my argument is you have to apply it to the extent of that understanding. And the problem is that, you know, most systems out there don't do that. The religious especially. They have one focus on well-being, and it's the well-being under the God, right? So the reason that you do things in God's nature, the reason that you follow God's commands is because you want a higher well-being at the end, right? You don't want to be punished. You want to be given a reward. You want to go to heaven. So if that's part of your system, then you have to apply that across the board. And if you apply that across the board, then using God as a basis for it doesn't make any sense. It's just completely unnecessary. So yeah, that's again what I would have to say on some of that. And again, I just don't think there's any good evidence for free will. So
I was talking again. You're talking about something irrelevant. Can I please finish my thought?
Sure.
Richard's
in charge. So
whatever you want, call bad stuff or whatever you want to call it. Like when someone kills, why do you think that happens?
Say that again. Your mic's a little bit muffled for me right now, so I'm having trouble hearing all the words. But it sounded like you said, "Why do we consider somebody killing somebody bad?" Is that kind of the gist?
Why do you think people do bad stuff?
Oh, why do people do bad stuff? Because not everybody has the exact same understanding of what well-being is. Everybody uses well-being, but not everybody applies it exactly. And so for some of us, purposefully tripping somebody is just always bad, just always, 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 always bad, right? But for some of us, there is an exception where we can slightly trip somebody as a joke because that builds camaraderie and that makes the society or like our work environment or our friendship or whatever. It just increases that, which just makes us, again, better off. It's just all about well-being again. So again, these are just descriptions, man. It's not evil is not a tangible thing. It's not like there's an ounce of evil that you can put in a cup or anything, right? It's just a concept, right? It's not even like colors, man. Colors are more freaking real than like evil and goodness, because colors are actually based on, wavelengths, man. Like we can measure that crap. And it's like, so it just, again, we're kind of in the same boat here, where it just feels like we don't have any good reason to accept anything beyond, them being descriptions. And yeah, I don't know where we have some divine source of morality. So if you can present one, I'd love to see it. But I haven't seen it yet.
You mentioned that people do evil or bad stuff because they don't have the same definition of well-being, but don't you consider humans something wrong with human nature? Otherwise, why would we do bad stuff?
This idea comes from religions pretty much exclusively, and it's disgusting, and it's why I am against religious concepts, right?
Sure,
is because so many religions have this. Hang on just a second. So many religions have this concept that we as individuals are inherently broken from the inside out. And that's disgusting. Imagine having a child and telling them every single day, you're a piece of shit. You're nothing. Shame on you for doing this thing. You horrible, horrible piece of crap. How dare you? That's torture. That is absolute fucking torture, man. Like, and on top of that, some people make it even worse somehow by doing that whole, oh, good for you. You tried your hardest, but you're just a piece of shit and you'll just never be better no matter what. You're always going to be the worst type of existence that could possibly be. That's terrible. That's disgusting. That really, in my experience, that really only comes from religious mindsets. So.
Yeah, sure. Religious people think that people are broken, but they also have a way to better ourselves.
Yeah, but they haven't shown us that we're broken to begin with. Okay, that hasn't ever been demonstrated.
Yeah, so that's the point. Well, you see, people are evil or do bad stuff. So why do you think that is?
We
Richard,
don't.
Would you like? I've tried to.
I'm pretty sure
I've
just spent a good 5 minutes explaining to
really
you that we don't. If I caused SR Otari, if I caused SR to fall and badly damage his head and get some kind of brain injury, which meant he was wheelchair bound for his rest of his life, would you consider that that was me being evil?
I didn't get the question.
If I caused secular Rarity to fall and bash his head and receive a brain injury, which meant he was wheelchair bound for the rest of his life, would you consider that that was me being evil?
Well, sure.
Why? What happens if I was doing it as a joke? What happens if me and SR, as part of our friendship, often leave banana skins lying around at the top of stairs? Which we do frequently, even though we live 5,000 miles apart, or in doorways. What happens if it's a regular thing we do? We just play jokes on each other, which we consider harmless fun. It builds our friendship. All our other friends are fine with it. And on just this one occasion, it goes wrong. Am I acting in an evil way? Is my intention evil for putting that banana skin down?
So if you're joking around, your intention is to play around, right?
Well, this is what I'm asking you. This is the question I'm asking you.
I would say that means does not justify the end. It's your actions at the end of the day, not your intention, that matters.
So I disagree, and I think there are lots of examples that we can show, just like the one Richard was talking about. So if somebody stabs somebody and they die, is the first person doing a bad action in your eyes? Just yes or no, or just lean yes, lean no. Like, these aren't difficult questions. So
yes.
Okay, yeah. I think in general, yeah, like most people would probably be on board with that. What if the person who stabbed the second person was doing so because the second person was attempting to kill their family? Is that bad in your eyes?
If it's defense, if it's in the case of defense, then no.
Cool. So the action's exactly the same, and the only thing that's different is the intention, meaning that what you just said about the actions being the only thing that's important is not true even in your system. Intentions do matter, and that's where I come back to evil being a descriptor, right? So what happens is, in my view, is something, an action occurs, right? Or a thought is expressed or had, right? And then we can say, oh, that doesn't exactly adhere to the whole well-being thing, it seems. Okay, that's probably not good, right? It's probably not good. And then we go, oh, well, it's actually even worse than that because, this is kind of something that's really hardcore going against that well-being. So like now it's bad. See, evil comes in when there's this extra layer of intention, right? Like the person just stomped on the baby puppies just simply because they wanted to. There wasn't like, oh my gosh, this will save humanity. There wasn't like oh man, it was an accident and I fell and I squished them. It was like, I just woke up on a Sunday, just had a breakfast, drinking my morning tea, and let me go kill some puppies. Like that's where we add the evil, because it's the intention behind it plus the action. And again, I think you agree with that just based on the way you answered those questions.
Based on my questions, yeah, I would agree. I think I used the incorrect definition of as justifying demons.
Maybe I don't know how that changes any of the things that Richard and I have just said, really. But yeah, I don't know. Again, we started out with the problem of evil is a problem for atheism, Otari, and it kind of seemed like you moved off of that pretty quick because you wanted to talk more about morality, which is fine with me because I love talking about morality, especially from a God-based thing. But
if I may ask another thing, would you say
it's up to
that,
Richard. Oh, Richard, I think you're muted.
I've just done the Johnny Angel.
There's that sultry voice.
Apologies. And I'm the producer. Atari, I'll give you one more. Go on, I'll give you one more. Seeing as you know, I was a bit harsh on you earlier. Go on, we'll let you have one more go, and then we'll probably let you go. Would you like to respond to SR?
If evolution is true, does evil or bad stuff is helpful to its process? Like, why didn't it go out of passion, so to speak, like thousands of years ago, if evolution is true?
So evolution being true doesn't have anything to that is not contradictory with the idea of a God existing and a creationist God, right? It also doesn't have anything to do with God being the foundation of morality. Like these are concepts that are completely separate and absolutely can be parsed out like that. So there are lots and lots and lots of people out there who fully accept all of the available evidence for evolution, right? And they still believe that there is a deity who created the universe and started everything. And they still put their foundation of morality in that divine essence, right? Whatever it is. I still think there's problems with that, but that doesn't matter right now, because what you said was, if evolution is real, then they're like, we don't really have a leg to stand on with this whole moral stuff. And yet everybody seems to be talking about morals. So how does that work? And again, it works because those two concepts are just not in contradiction with each other. Again, I don't think there's any reason to accept that there is a deity that created all of existence and started the process of evolution. But there is absolutely no reason to accept that just because evolution is real, like a God couldn't exist, or B, foundation for morals in a divine thing don't exist, right? Those two things are compatible, plus all of the other non-religious-y stuff, right? Just because evolution being real doesn't have anything to do with like the foundation of morality being well-being, right? Or existence or something, right? So they're just not connected, man. They're just not connected. And I think that is actually the theme of this call, in fact, which is fine. It's fine. I like to have more of a, kind of follow like a line of thought and reasoning and arguments, but we've bounced all over the place. And I think one of the reasons we have is because what these, I guess, arguments or claims more so and questions that you're presenting to us, Otari, these are very similar to the thought-stopping techniques that I had just internalized so much when I was a believer. And so really these don't allow for deep conversation because they're not supposed to. They're not supposed to be something that helps further our understanding. They're just supposed to be something that stops people in their tracks. And so I feel like that's why every time we tried to go down a route in this call today, we had to stop and we started a different path, which again, I think we got to a dead end pretty quickly. But I mean, I appreciate you calling. I really do. I love having these conversations. I would rather have a conversation where it's more just about your own thoughts and stuff, as opposed to just what other people have said, and just trying to go like, oh, Frank Turek said this one great thing and it shuts down all atheists or whatever. And it's like, that's stupid. Like, I don't want to say things to a believer that shuts them down. I want to say things to a believer that furthers their ability to think critically and furthers our discussion and our understanding as, a collective. So yeah, I guess that's kind of my suggestion. Just maybe think a little bit more about those things that are kind of designed to shut conversation down, because I think you'll start having better conversation.
SR just gave some great advice there. Think. Because it is really what you're calling a lot, and you're giving some great advice, and you come up with these arguments which really aren't very good, and they're usually knocked down pretty quickly, and you don't seem to accept what's being said to you. Rather than kind of being defensive and kind of just throwing the stuff to one side that you don't agree with, just think about the things that have been said to you. Thank you for the call. I'm going to let you go. We have got a lot of great calls lining up. We'll just go through a couple of announcements before we do those. Take those. We've got a brand new, exciting way to support the ACA. Buy an engraved brick and become part of the library's legacy. Check out this video.
Have you ever wanted to make a permanent impact on the atheist community of Austin? Help support our space for free thought by buying a custom engraved brick to be laid on the building grounds to help raise funds for improvements. Our building has stood as a beacon for years, bringing people together. But 3 years of emptiness due to the pandemic have taken a toll, leaving it in disrepair. Help us restore this hub of connection and support by buying a brick. Moses had his stone tablets, but we're doing our own version. Join our brick fundraiser and let your engraved messages stand the test of time, minus commandments. Visit tiny.cc/ACA bricks for more information.
I love that thing, by the way, man. I am super excited. I haven't gotten my brick yet, but I'm going to, and I'm going to tell everybody this because this was the thing that really excited me when I went to the website. After you get your custom engraved brick, guys, you can actually order like a mini one that they just send to your house. So I am going to get a mini custom engraved brick sent to my house too. I am excited for that, man. That is going to be cool. Honest. I love it. I just like tiny things are adorable. So anyway, whatever. I'm sorry. I derailed this.
No, that's cool. Other ways, other than your tiny little engraved brick and regular size brick that you can get of supporting the show, you can get the new limited edition t-shirts. You can visit tiny.cc/merchaca to get them now. And I love this month's, as well. I think it's brilliant. You can go to tiny.cc/ACA flyers, and you can get your printable calling flyers. Post these with permission to community bulletin boards so people know that they should call our show and defend their faith. If you do post any flyers, make sure to snap a picture of it and place it and send it to TV at atheist-community.org, and we may feature your photo in an upcoming show. And of course, if you happen to be in the Austin area on October 29th, 2023, then please join us for the live broadcasts of Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience. Talk Heathen will be hosted by Christy Powell and the main muter himself, Johnny P. Angel, and the Atheist Experience will be hosted by Johnny P. Angel and Sophia Spiner. Doors open at noon, and we hope to see you there. And we now have a channel that houses all of the shows of the ACA in audio podcast form. Visit tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. We also have a couple of super chats to read out. So, SR, would you like to read the first one that we have?
Yeah. From Ben 9 Lives, gave us $9.99, saying, "Thank you, SR and Richard, for another entertaining Sunday show. Wonderful alternative from a church service." I agree.
Absolutely. And Alan Ferguson sent $10 and said, "In awe of SR and Knobhead." Richard, I love that one. I'd go with Knobhead every time. And of course, you can become there's another way to support us, and that's by becoming a patron. And we have our top 5 patrons as usual. And SR, if you'd like to do the honors.
Yeah, I can do it. I have number 1, the always wonderful Dingleberry Jackson. And then we've got in second place, of course, a good friend, Oops, all singularity. Number 3, another wonderful regular here, Devor Valjen. Number 4 is a friend, a person that has been supporting this show for a long time, Kalevi Helveti. So thank you all so much. You are all super duper regular. And then number 5, we've actually got a new person I haven't seen before, which this is awesome. So number 5 is Left in the Leaves, which is awesome. Absolutely great. Thank you for supporting. And then an honorable mention to a name I know I've seen a bunch as well. Thank you for being a longtime supporter. Number 6 is Moldred D. Malcontent. So thank all of you, because it is y'all actually that keep this going, not Richard and I, despite how egotistical we may be when we get off the show. But yeah, it's that support.
Yeah, absolutely. We have some SR. We have some amazing calls.
I know they've all started coming in. You know, guys, we open lines before the show starts for like 20 or 30 minutes, and that is the best time to call in, because then we can actually have, you know, time to kind of plan out, like, okay, we'll take this theist first, we'll talk about morality, then we'll talk about, you know, abortion or whatever. So like, it's harder when you call in later, but that's okay. We're going to get to as many as we can.
Yeah, and we're going to take David, him from Malaysia, who says that the Bible makes sense.
Ooh.
David, what do you mean by the Bible makes sense?
Hi. Okay, so good evening to you. And then, first of all, I've been watching this show many times, The Line, Ethan. All right, so I understand that God cannot be proven, so I'm not going to claim that. And my claim is that Bible makes sense, and I'm at this point that I need you to judge whether my view makes sense to you, because I'm at the point that you have convinced me that I could be wrong. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, that's definitely a good place to be, I think. Yeah, answer Richard's question if you can, David. What are you kind of getting at when you say the Bible makes sense? What does that mean to you?
All right, so my claim is the Bible makes sense. I'll start from, the Bible does not start with Genesis, it starts with Isaiah 14, where God created heaven and earth, and the devil, the Satan, he rebelled, and he was sent to earth, and then he starts with, now he goes to Genesis, where Adam and
real
Eve
quick,
were deceived.
hang on, David. I'm sorry, but why are you saying we start with Isaiah? What's your reasoning for that?
Because the Bible does not start with Genesis, because when it starts with Genesis, it does not make any sense.
But
the story.
But I have a
Bible.
Hang on, David. Why is Isaiah? Why are you putting Isaiah first? Okay, I have a Bible right here. This was actually my Bible that was issued to me when I was going through confirmation many years ago, and Genesis is definitely the first book here. Okay, why are you saying the correct order is Isaiah? Does it have to do with age? Does it have to do with something else? Like what is your criteria for that?
Because the story starts from there.
So what you're saying is by reworking the order of the books in the Bible, it then makes sense. So then do you see why your claim initially is wrong now? Because you said the Bible makes sense, but the Bible only makes sense by arbitrarily after the fact cutting it up and putting it in a different order to make it make sense. Does that?
Yes.
Do you get that?
Yes.
Okay, right. So that's problematic though, right? Because it's like me saying, it's like me pointing at a shepherd's pie and saying, this is chicken noodle soup. And then somebody goes, well, how is it chicken noodle soup? And I go, well, because what I've done is I've, changed what we all think of when we think of chicken noodle soup to fit this shepherd's pie, right? Is it like, that's a terrible example, mainly because this is a really bad way of making sense out of things. Like, are you following along here? I guess what I'm trying to say, David, is I have a massive problem with you saying the Bible makes sense if and only if we just completely rearrange it as it's been presented to us for generations and force the story to make sense to us today. It just seems really after the fact, man. So it kind of feels like the Bible doesn't make sense and you're admitting it by having to recreate it.
Yeah, it's telling a story and it is rearranging by itself, starting from Isaiah. And I understand that it is hard, unacceptable. But if you go by the arrangement that I'm telling, it will make a sense.
But why did you arrange it like that to begin with? Because if the reason that you arranged it like this to begin with is specifically so that it quote unquote makes sense at the end, then don't you see how this is a big circle? That's what I'm saying.
Which is why many don't understand the way I understand, because as you say, it's a problem that it does not go by order.
Yeah, it is. It is a problem. I agree. And when you read the Bible or the Quran, for instance, in the way that it's been printed many times versus the actual age of the various books, right, or chapters, it completely tells a different story. I mean, I agree that that is true. The problem though is again like the whole making sense of it thing. I don't exactly know what you're getting at there, unless what you're just saying is the narrative seems to flow a little bit better, which is fine. Like, you know, the Lord of the Rings as a narrative flows perfectly fine. It all makes sense within the story, but it isn't actually describing the reality around us. And when I when I generally say things like that makes sense, you know, or something makes sense, what I tend to be referring to is that relation to reality, right? That whole correspondence of a statement to the world around us, because that's how we know it's true. And that follows logic.
Agree. I'm not claiming that the Bible is true or God is true.
Okay.
My claim is I'm sticking to it that the Bible makes sense according to my arrangement.
Richard, do you have any thoughts on this?
I mean,
man?
I don't know what you want us to. I don't know
Right.
exactly what you're asking us to respond to. You know, and because look, this is the thing, and this is why I asked you in what way it made sense to begin with. Because, and this is something I will often argue against atheists for, is because people will say that the Bible is this or the Bible is that, and the Bible means this or the Bible means that, but it all depends on the context. And because there are many, many ways to read the Bible. You can do it as a believer. You can do it as a historian. You can do it as a textual critic. You can do it as a theologian. There are lots of different ways to read it. And depending on which way you are reading it will depend entirely on whether it makes sense and how you interpret it. So just to simply come and say, well, I've kind of rearranged it and it now makes sense to me. That's kind of, well, cool. I could rearrange it in a way that makes sense to me, but it still gives me no context as to whether you think, does this way that you have rearranged it to make sense to you, does it inform you in any way that God actually exists or the Bible is true in what it is saying?
It does not explain to me that the God of the Bible is true, or that the arrangement is true. My claim, as you read it from Genesis to the end, the Bible does not make sense, and due to that, it does not tell a story. So when I rearranged it,
So to fix that problem that you have come across, you have reinterpreted everything. You have changed the context. You have specifically changed the order that supposed scholars and theologians from many years ago said this was the divinely inspired order from God. The reason that you're doing this, David, the reason that you're doing this, man, is because you recognize the problems that we're pointing out. And what you're in the process of trying to say, yeah, but there's got to be something here that's valuable. And it's like, yeah, nobody's really disagreeing with that. Nobody really is disagreeing that you know, your particular set of chapters in a particular order does or doesn't make sense. Like that honestly isn't particularly important, man. Like the backstory for one minor character in Lord of the Rings makes sense. Does that mean that it's true? Does that mean that it is connected to the reality around us? Because if at the end of the day, all you're saying is, hey, man, this story actually flows in a narrative structure start to finish, and it hits all the points that a story should hit. It's like, yeah, man, like, sure, no worries there. But I'd just rather talk about things that are more important. I'd just rather have a conversation where we're talking about whether or not that story that makes sense in itself internally, whether that makes sense to the story of the world around us, to this reality, right? So I don't think Richard and I are really disagreeing that, like, you know, the story of Joseph in terms of stories flows logically, right? Like he obviously couldn't have been in Egypt until he was sent there somehow. Don't exactly know how he got there. Could have been, you know, from his brothers selling him off. Could have been some Midianite traders that picked him up. We don't know. That doesn't matter, I guess. But yeah, just on the face, trying to give you as many toys to play with. It just doesn't feel like this claim really is much, right? But unfortunately, no matter how you reconstruct the stories of the Bible, you're going to have things in them that are just seemingly flat incorrect, right? Like, even if you put the story of Genesis second, guess what you have? You still have two creation stories that disagree not only with each other, but with all understanding that we seemingly have about the universe around us. So I just don't know on what level, again, it really makes sense, because I just don't feel like we've had a good explanation of that.
Yeah, that's the problem here. I understand that, but you are rejecting my claim before listening to the claim, and because I understand you have many callers who have.
You don't appear to have made a claim, David. This is the thing.
Yeah.
You've simply said, if I rearrange the Bible, it makes sense. Well, cool. If I rearrange the Quran, it makes sense. And that's because the Quran is not written in chronological order.
Right.
If you rearrange it, it makes more sense. That has no bearing on whether it is true. And, you know, David, go away. Give us a call back next week. David, go away and have a think about what it is you're trying to kind of elucidate. And, you know, try and put it in a kind of a form, and the form of an argument, rather than simply saying, well, if you rearrange it, it makes sense. We do appreciate you calling, David, but I think you need to kind of work a little bit on the kind of delivery of the argument. So go away and have a think about it and give us a call back. We've got another super chat from Nika's Breaker, who is as well as gets sending the super chat of one of our amazing volunteers. We appreciate all of them, and I will never stop shouting out the people who work behind the scenes, from the tiniest little roles to the biggest roles, because every single person is important.
There's no tiny roles, Richard, just tiny bricks.
That's correct. And on that note, Nika's Breaker sends $6.66 and says, to two of my favorite hosts and our mods and their great ideas, is that brick a Lego? From Alan Ferguson. Next fundraiser, Legos.
Ooh.
Now, I appreciate the super chat, but I have got a serious comment to make on that. If you talk to the Lego company, they will tell you absolutely that the plural of Lego is Lego, not Legos.
Really?
It seems to be an exclusively American thing about calling Lego, multiple Legos. It's
so
not the case.
It's just like deer. It's just like deer. 1 deer, 12 deer, all deer. Just
the word Lego means play well. That's what it means. And so if you multiply playing well, it's still playing well.
Yeah,
it's not playing wells.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But that aside,
yeah, no, you've learned some things today, folks. Like, it's not all just religion and stuff. Sometimes
it's not all religion. We
like
can
Lego.
learn about the plural of Lego, and that tiny bricks can be good bricks too. We're going to take Muji, who wants to discuss the Quranic verses and wants to explain to me why I was wrong about a specific verse. Now, before we start, Muji, I just want to preempt this, because I have talked to you before, that, and I just want to kind of give context here, that your understanding of Islam and your interpretation is a minority view. It is not the, and that doesn't mean you're wrong or you're any more wrong than anyone else. But I'll just point that out before we begin, because when I read things, I tend to do it from the academic point of view and the consensus opinion. So this may be why you find disagreement with me. But go ahead anyway, and let's see where we go with it.
Yeah, hello. I just called because last time I didn't get the chance to explain about moon splitting by Prophet Muhammad. And you told me to go and read my scripture. In reality, I have read it, and I found more than 100 verses in Quran explaining about the miracle of Prophet Moses, about a stick becoming a snake from the beginning to the end, and what happens, the result, everything. And many verses that Quran says that, oh, Muhammad, you don't need miracle. We have given you the Quran. That should be enough. And then suddenly, one verse in Quran, chapter 54, verse 1, says that the hour has drawn near and the moon has split, which doesn't say anything about such a great miracle if it happened. Who did it? What happened? How many pieces? And the result, what happened? People, believed or not. So I just called to tell you that I have read my scripture very well, and I absolutely disagree with these, extremist Muslims who say that the Quran, Prophet Muhammad split the moon, and they make a lot of.
I don't think it's extremist Muslims.
No, these aren't extremists.
These are moderate mainstream individuals. This has been talked about for a very, very long time. So I don't understand this. I'm with you, Muji, in the sense of like, yeah, there's some stuff in the Quran that kind of makes this seem like he wasn't actually splitting the moon and it was all metaphor. I mean, that's fine. We can take that approach. I don't disagree with you there. But that adds another bigger problem that I think all religious texts have, which is what's your criteria for telling metaphor and similes from reality. I think that's a huge problem for religious texts, and I've never actually had a good answer on that. But yeah, again, you then have to deal with all of the believing Muslims who say to you that you're just flat wrong, right? And not just like the billions of people alive today, but like the many generations of people that went back hundreds of years. Like that this is a common thing, man. This isn't just some random one dude said, yeah, he split the moon, like for real. It's not metaphor. Like a lot of believing Muslims, a lot of scholars have said that it was for real. So what do you say to that?
Yeah, I just have to tell you that it wasn't even metaphor. Nothing happened. It's Quran simply talking about the hour, the last, when the end comes, the moon will split. Yes. And how many pieces? He doesn't explain. So the chapter explains everything about the hour and after.
So I'm pretty sure. That the verse, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's, let's see, Surah Al-Qamar, right? 54, and then Ayah 1 and 2. Yeah. Right. Does that sound right? Yeah, and it basically says the hour is at hand in the present tense, and the moon has been split, past tense. So it doesn't sound like it's talking about the future pretty clearly. So
no. Okay, but it doesn't look. You can talk in grammar. You can talk have past perfect in the future as well. So
yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that, but then you just have to show criteria as to how that's different here than it is every other place, that they use the exact same terminology to talk about stuff having happened in the past. That's fine. I'll accept your answer there, but then you're on much shakier ground.
Yeah, I have to tell you this. Quran chapter 29, verse 50 and 51 say, but they say, why are not signs sent down to you to him from his Lord? Say, the signs are only with Allah, and I am only a clear warner. And isn't it sufficient for them what we reveal to you, the book which is recited to them? Indeed, in that is a mercy. Okay, I don't need to continue more. Chapter 6, verse 35, chapter 6, verse 37, chapter 6, verse 109, chapter 6, verse 111, and on and on. I can tell you how many verses in Quran says, "Oh Muhammad, you don't need They ask you for sign, but you don't need any sign. So you can go and find yourself." So many verses in Quran says to Prophet Muhammad, you don't need a sign. So these are clear verses that Prophet Muhammad didn't have a miracle. The only miracle he had was Quran.
I understand what you're saying there, Muji, but the problem is specifically with the thing that I was just talking about right before you started saying all of this.
Yeah.
We were talking about tense sequence, which is a specific way of conjugating verbs, right? So action words that describe things that happen, right? So in that verse, in that very specific ayah, it makes it pretty clear that it's talking in the past tense about the splitting of the moon. The moon has been split, right? And then you just went off on this whole thing about like, hey, there's all these other verses in the Quran that says Muhammad doesn't need a miracle. Like, I'm fine with that, man. Again, I give you all the toys to play with. Like, yes, that is true. You are correct. But the issue is then now you're in contradiction with the Quran. You're the one that's
no. I'm not in contradiction. I'm in contradiction with those who say that Prophet Muhammad did it. Yes, I'm in contradiction with them.
Well, Prophet Muhammad didn't do it. Allah did it. Allah did it. He did it through Prophet Muhammad, just like he spoke the words of the Quran through the angel Jibril. Right? Like nobody's questioning that Muhammad split the moon. It was Allah, of course. Muhammad is just the messenger.
Yeah.
But what was part of that message? It was splitting the moon in half according to the Quran.
The conduit.
No,
he was the conduit, as he was, when, because you've just said Muhammad didn't need miracles. And I don't necessarily disagree with that in the context of the Quran. Nowhere in the Quran does it, as far as I'm aware, does it say that Muhammad personally needs miracles. But miraculous things are attributed to happening in Muhammad's life, like him taking the night journey. That's not a normal, unmiraculous event. That's a miraculous event which was centered around Muhammad. So just because you think that Muhammad wasn't responsible personally for doing these things, and I'm pretty sure that last time we had the conversation, you said that the splitting of the moon wasn't in the Quran. And I may be wrong on that, and I'd have to look back and see if that I need correcting on that. And it was at that point that I told you that you should go and look at your Quran and look at that, because it is definitely in the Quran, and it is attributed. Sorry, go on, respond to that.
Yeah. I just wanted to tell you that you said it is not in Quran that it is in Quran that Prophet Muhammad split the moon. I said no, it is not in Quran, because it doesn't mention at all who split the moon, how many pieces. When nearly 100 verses in Quran says that Moses, peace be upon him, dropped the stick, and then it became a snake, and then he picked it up and became again the stick, and then so on. What happened that some people believed, some people didn't believe, all these things Quran explained. Even the split, when he split the sea, the Red Sea, Allah says after, he said, don't touch it, let it be, okay? So this verse doesn't say after he split the moon, what happened? Who put it back? Nothing about that. It's absolutely quiet. So that's why I say Prophet Muhammad didn't split the moon. This is just people who couldn't interpret this verse. They started.
If nobody put it back, we would have a split moon, regardless of whether Muhammad did it or Allah just did it himself, or he employed a small newt with wings and very sharp claws to do it. So the verse says that the moon was split, and if you're now arguing that, well, nobody put it back, we would still see it split. That's clearly not the case.
No,
By
By
Allah.
whom? Quran
By
doesn't say-
Allah.
No, yes.
Hold up. This surah 54 is written in a very similar style to many other surahs in the Quran. It is clearly Allah talking to Muhammad. Like, if you go read the next verses, okay? So the hour has drawn near and the moon was split in two. Yet whenever they see a sign, they turn away, saying, same old magic. They rejected the truth and followed their own desires, and every matter will be settled, even though the stories of destroyed nations that have already come to them are a sufficient deterrent. The Quran is profound in wisdom, but warnings are of no benefit to them. So turn away from them, O Prophet. It is literally Allah speaking directly to the Prophet. And that happens regularly in the Quran. So Allah is definitely saying he split the freaking moon in half through Muhammad. Like, that's not up for contention. And the reason so many mainstream Muslims for literally hundreds of years have thought that way is because that is the plain reading of it. It absolutely is. And any other workaround you want to put on it, like, fine, man, I'll give you those toys to play with. But the problem is that then the entire rest of the Quran now has so many problems because you have to be consistent and you have to apply that across the board to all these other surahs, man. So again, like, it's strange to me that you're arguing for this, right? Like, it could just be, you have an easier time just being like, hey, it didn't actually split the moon. Like, it's just a metaphor. And just biting the bullet and just dealing with that, which again, I don't think there's a good criteria for determining metaphor versus reality in these ancient texts. But at least you're not denying what the text literally says.
All right. Now, I can just tell you that those who say that Prophet Muhammad split or Allah did it for Prophet Muhammad, whatever, then they have to recognize that Quran contradicts itself because there are.
Yes, the Quran does contradict itself. That's why abrogation is a thing. So explain to me the verse that abrogates this. What verse abrogates this?
I mean, there is no verse in Quran that abrogates such a verse, okay?
Yes, okay, so then it stands according to the Quran. The Quran is where we get the understanding of abrogation. The Quran explicitly says that if we provide you another verse later on, it abrogates the first one because of Allah's great wisdom and power. So if there's no verse that abrogates this, then by the understanding the Quran itself lays out, bro, again, this is still real according to the Quran. It absolutely freaking happened. It did. There is no other discussion. You can say it's metaphor. That's fine. But then, again, we have all these other problems.
I didn't say it is metaphor.
Right, you said it's talking about the end times, but it's clearly not talking about the future.
Okay, it's about the hour and it's explaining. So I can explain for you, but maybe it take much time because it is about the hour and then afterlife that they reject all these and then it goes to hell when it happens. People realize they say that, oh, we were wrong because they rejected the signs and so on. But anyway, those verses clearly says that Prophet Muhammad didn't have a miracle. Yeah, yes. Yes.
Muji. I've gone kind of. You say it takes so much time. I agree. We've got a load of callers on the line, and we want to try and get as many as possible. And we're kind of like running tight already. So I'm going to let you go. Give us a call back, and we'll spend some more time on that other subject you want to talk about. The thing that gets me with this, Muji, by his own admission, disagrees with many other Muslims.
Yeah.
Isn't one of the claims about the Quran that it's the best written book which cannot be kind of repeated because it's written so well that it can only come from God? And yet, so many Muslims disagree with each other in their interpretation of it.
It also, 100% there. It also regularly makes the claim that it is both clear and unambiguous. So I don't know why Muji's having so much trouble figuring out what Allah was trying to say, because it's clear and unambiguous to me. Allah split the moon in half as a way to demonstrate to people, and even that wasn't good enough for them. So Allah stopped doing signs. So
it's clear and unambiguous, and that's why in the 10th century, Tabari had to write a whole series of interpretations.
That's why
based
modern
on
exactly modern Islam doesn't even. You don't even have the 5 pillars of Islam in the Quran, you guys.
No.
They're found in the Hadiths. You know, like there's this whole story about Muhammad going to talk to Allah. And Allah being like, tell everybody to pray towards Mecca like 100 times a day. And Muhammad was like, I don't know, God, like 100's a lot. Could we maybe do 50? And then he like walks downstairs back to earth. It's nonsensical. But anyway, yeah.
Quickly, before we go on to another call, just a quick announcement to say that, have you ever said to yourself, I really love the content the ACA creates, but I wish there was a way I could get it all of the time? Well, then we've got you covered. We now have 2 24/7 live streams. AXP TV delivers a constant stream of shows, clips, and specials from the over 26 seasons of the Atheist Experience. And now Heathen TV brings you clips from Talk Heathen. Watch or simply listen to your favorite hosts and discover some hosts you've never heard of. Visit tiny.cc/AXPTV and tiny.cc/HeathenTV to join the fun. And we do have another super chat. SR, I'll let you take this one.
You're talking about that $2 Australian from Mark Caesar. Is that what you're looking at there? Because you know what, Mark, you did the right thing. You checked all the correct boxes, hit the right button. Mark Caesar is saying SR dance, monkey dance. And you know what? I guess I'm obligated to. You sent in the super chat. So Mark, this one's for you, brother. Woo! Yeah! I wish we had like stripper music. Oh, now you put me on the hold. No. We're not doing that too long. We'll just instantly start dropping viewers and subscribers.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mark. And we also have Miranda Rensberger, who sent $5 and says, thank you for another great show. It's always nice to start the week with some rational thought. We've got plenty more calls to come, Miranda. And we're going to take, I think, Aaron from Oklahoma, who says the Bible itself is the evidence for God. Aaron, are you there? Hello, Aaron. You should be on now.
Are you there?
Yes.
Are you there?
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
You think the Bible itself is the evidence for God? Talk us through that one.
Well, my basic argument is that as far as a work of literature goes, the Bible itself is a kind of a unique production in one sense, and that is because it's written by a hodgepodge of various writers, and a lot of which are anonymous, and we don't know who wrote certain books, and it's basically just a group project. Okay, so now if you know anything about great literature, you know that great works of literature are never written via group project. And it's a very unique thing.
Except for the Bible.
Not only the Bible, but we'll come on to that in a minute, but go on.
I'm sorry. I shouldn't interrupt.
Yeah, I mean, of course, if someone were to say, well, the Bible, well, that's circular because the Bible is the work that is under contention. So I would ask for like evidence outside of that as far as a great work of literature that is written via group project. And
the Bible isn't okay. Let me stop you there real quick, because I contest that the Bible is a single great work of literature.
Yeah.
There are so many different textual forms in it. There are so many different styles in it. It is not a single great work of literature. It is considered a great work of literature because 1,500 years ago. And a little time before that, a lot of people put this thing together, and because of its importance to kind of human history, because of the belief people have in it, it is acquired over time this idea of it being a great work of literature. Just like, incidentally, the Tipitaka, the Buddhist holy text, which is 11 times longer than the Bible, and was written by multiple people, many of whom we don't know the names of. So it's certainly that being on its own doesn't make it a great work of literature, and it's certainly not exclusively so.
Well, as far as it being a great work of literature, regardless of whether you think it's fiction or nonfiction, whether you particularly like it or not, it is a great work of literature, because if you say no, you have to explain why it sold 5 billion copies and is the greatest selling book in the history of the world. I mean,
Well, not really.
That doesn't
Those-
make it a
those
great
things are
work of
totally different.
literature. The Sun newspaper
that?
sells many, and other rags sell many thousands of copies on a daily basis. And they are not great works of literature by any means. Simply selling many copies does not make you a great work of literature.
And do you remember the thing that Richard and I said after the last call? You might not have heard it, but there is actually a claim in the Quran. There's a challenge that is often brought by Muslim apologists who say, if anybody can but bring a text that is written like the Quran, then you will disprove the Quran because it's the only thing that's written like it. It's so special. It's so amazing. It's so unique. Nothing else in the world is like it. And they include the Bible in that nothing else. So it just kind of sounds like you're making the exact same claim as the Muslims. And in either scenario, I don't even know what you're asking for. Like you're asking for another book that is as good as the Bible or the Quran. I just genuinely don't understand what this challenge is. And I don't understand how it indicates your point that just because we have a book like that somehow this is the demonstration that a deity is real.
Yeah, and real quick, just to
would you
piggyback on the
agree?
back of Aaron, just real quick, so I just want to get some clarification. Just to piggyback on the back of what SR said as well. What specific criteria are you giving that makes it a great work of literature in your eyes? What is the criteria that makes a great work of literature?
Well, if you know very much about literature, you will find that the Bible occupies a very singular spot. It doesn't sell thousands of copies like your newspaper analogy. It's in the billions, 5 billion. It's the best-selling
How many
book in
Qurans have
the
been
world.
sold?
That's indisputable.
How many Qurans have been sold?
I think two or 3 billion. I think I'm not sure exactly, but I know.
So with the Muslim population increasing at the believing Muslim population increasing at a faster pace than the other religions in the world, more individuals will need to buy more Qurans to teach and study the word of Allah. So when the Quran surpasses the number of books sold by the Bible, will you now become a believing Muslim and make these claims for the Quran?
I'll wait for that to happen.
But you will, is what you're saying. I just want to know, you will do that. You will convert to Islam, and when that happens, you will do that, right? Or you're saying no, you won't, because that criteria isn't important when it comes to determining whether things are true.
Well, that's not the only criterion. Okay, what was the
yes or no? You are converting to Islam whenever the Quran sells more than the Bible, or you're being inconsistent, and this argument really isn't as important.
It has many different writers. Yes,
the Quran has many different writers.
It sells more.
Yeah, Quran has many different writers in the same book.
Muhammad
didn't know how to write. It's literally in the Quran. Muhammad was illiterate. Couldn't have been Muhammad.
Well,
with multiple scribes. So
he did not dictate it.
So that's the story, but we have good evidence. We have good evidence to indicate that he probably did not. For instance, the palimpsest. What's the description? Where was it found? Shoot, I'm sorry, but literally a palimpsest is a text that has written on it, and then somebody came later and then wrote over that original text. So we have that of the Quran from a long time ago, which indicates that there are differences, meaning that the work has obviously been changed over the years, therefore multiple authors and writers and stuff. And again, there's the challenge about there's nothing else in the world like it. So it literally sounds like you're on the same footing as all the Muslims. And I guess I'm just wondering, what makes you choose the Bible?
I thought I thought that Muhammad was the primary dictator. If he didn't,
That's the story.
I know,
The story says Muhammad was the primary dictator, but there's even work now to indicate that Muhammad might not have actually been a person, that the term Muhammad is actually something similar to like the term Christ, which is just a title. It's just something you call everybody king, everybody's Caesar.
Is it okay if I just ask you a few questions, if that's okay?
That's Richard. Richard's in charge today, Aaron. So I'm just the dickhead next to him.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, to be honest, I'm still not sure what your criteria is for, because you seem to say selling a lot of copies is a criteria for a great book. But let's leave that aside and kind of go on to the next thing. Yeah, go on, Gish Gallopers. Give us your next bit, Aaron.
Okay. Is the Bible a work of nonfiction or fiction in your view?
I don't think it's exclusively one or the other. I don't think it's exclusively one or the other. I think there's elements of both throughout it.
So it doesn't lean one way or the other in your mind?
Correct, because it's written in so many different styles. There are aspects of it that are written in a more documentary style, and there are aspects of it that are written in a poetry style. There are aspects of written that are clearly written in a mythological style, like an Aesop's fable trying to get a point across. Like, these things are all throughout it. So to just say that the Bible is just this one monolith, I think is problematic. And I've said this already, but I think this is, again, another concept that comes exclusively from religion. Like, I don't find many non-religious people that just make this claim of like, the Bible is bad, or like, the Bible is wrong, because it's just super duper black and white, man. And that's the world we live in is just more nuanced and complicated than that. And when you understand the history of how the Bible came to be, I think it's just you step away from that, oh, the Bible's all fake or the Bible's all myth, because you recognize that there are parts of it that are actually accurate. Like, of course, but they're just trivial parts. They're just talking about a city.
One last question.
Okay.
One last question.
It's Richard's show. He's not stopping you, so I'd say go for it, Aaron.
It's fine. Go.
Okay, well, okay. So the fact that it's sold 5 billion copies and is the best-selling work in the history of the world, does that make it in any way singular?
No. Because the 5 billion copies are not the King James Version. When they say that number, I know this because the largest Christian printing, or one of the largest Christian publishing houses, is based in my state. So I've been to their headquarters. But they include all the versions of the Bible. So A, that's a good start right there. But then B, here's another thing that's really super duper important, which is at the time at which movable type was created, because Gutenberg didn't actually invent the printing press. That was done many a year ago in China. But what Gutenberg did was he created this concept of just making individual letters that you can just rearrange quicker. So that allowed for things to be printed much easier, right? The only book in circulation at the time was the Bible. So what else were we going to print? This is why we have the Enlightenment after the Gutenberg printing press, is because what they started doing is they started then going back and finding all of the Greek and Roman philosophers and stuff and republishing their work. But to show the proof of their concept to begin with, they printed the only thing that was available to them. So you've got all those numbers on your hand too.
Okay, just my final thought to kind of complete it and bring it around full circle was that my point is that God is the unifying vision for the Bible. Even though it's basically a group project, a lot of anonymous, it's all over the place as far as authorship and who did it. All great works require a unifying vision, a single unifying vision. And I say that single unifying vision is God. Now, a person can debate and say, well, it's not a great work, but then can
I push back on the unifying vision? I think there's a problem with what you just said, and I think I can demonstrate it to you.
Okay.
If God was the ultimate driver, if God was the unifying vision, if the Bible and all of its authors really are God-breathed and God-inspired, why then are we able to determine when the scribe changes? Why do we have the documentary hypothesis? because what we should have is a very clear pattern of speech and writing. This is the reason that when somebody writes an anonymous post on Facebook, if they're a public figure and we've got lots of writings from them in the past, we can pretty accurately determine that it was probably them, is because everybody has a particular pattern of speech and writing that is unique, very much like our fingerprints and the number of hairs on our butts. But yeah, I think you're on shakier ground with that. If you say that God is the one that is actually inspiring everything, then you have to now come to terms with why there is clearly different authorship. So we know when priests are writing versus the Yahwehs, like we do, and it's pretty obvious. So
keep in mind that I never said that God directly authored the Bible. Of course, he inspired it, which means he used human beings.
Right, but that's what I'm saying.
Their own style, their own syntax. Right.
But so then you're saying that God is not as powerful as them, and that they absolutely could have been changing the message from God from the beginning. See, that's what I'm saying. If you go this route, you're on way shakier ground, because now you're saying somehow God is not capable of telling his creation what to do. He can't actually make them do anything. He can't actually put his will into effect, which then puts you back on this spot of having to say, well, then how do I know the Bible is actually God-breathed from the beginning? You then have to determine what parts of the Bible are directly from God's mouth as this kind of main driving force. So again, I just think all of this is on shaky ground.
Okay. Just one last thought then. What I am saying, okay, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that God is the unifying vision behind all these various writers and styles. He's the unifying vision, meaning the overarching singular unifying vision that makes the whole thing coherent, not any individual writer or scribe or anything. God is that unifying vision.
Only he's not, and that's the problem, because many the earlier works in the Bible were written by people who did not believe in a single God. And in fact, what we have as God now is an amalgamation of at least El, of at least Yahweh, and of at least Baal. That's 3 gods out of an area that believed in many, many different gods. And they also believed that God had a consort that passed down from, sorry, I forget which ones, whether El or Yahweh was the father. I think El was the greater God to begin with. It had a consort, and then his son, Yahweh, actually inherited that consort before these things became amalgamated. So they're not actually talking about a single God figure. The Bible doesn't talk about a single God. That's the modern Christian interpretation of what the Bible teaches. And to say, even that aside, pushing that entirely aside, again, we can take the Buddhist Tipitaka, which is 11 times longer than the Bible, and we can say that is written about a single thing, the Dharma. That is the concentration, the focus of the Dharma. That does not mean that it makes it true, just because it has a single focus.
Right. Okay, so to wrap it up, because I know it's time to go. So you would deny that the Bible is a great work, even if you don't like it.
No, neither of us have said that.
No one has said it's not a great work.
Neither of us have said it's not a great work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we've only when we pushed back on that initially, Aaron, like really we were just coming at from the perspective of like, what is your criteria for determining this? And we didn't exactly get that, but that's okay. Like, I really do. I think this was a really good call, Aaron. I think it was great because it feels to me like you are thinking, like you are actually engaging, with the points that we're bringing up.
That.
Yeah. So please, like, call us back, man. Right. Again, and rewatch this. Actually,
Hey,
that's one thing a lot of people don't do. They don't rewatch the call. So.
You bet. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. Yeah,
thanks, Aaron.
Again, even if I felt like it, stuff was on shaky ground that he was saying, again, it did feel to me like he was, trying to engage more so than some of our other callers. So I always appreciate that.
Back. Yeah. I'd like him to call back, and absolutely. I think we can have lots of productive conversations with him. I do very much appreciate his calls. We are kind of vastly over time, but we're still going
way
to take
over
some
time, and we've got
calls.
more
We're
calls.
still going to take some calls.
We're gonna do
Josh, we're going to take, who is from Florida. He's a theist, and he wants to discuss why apologetic arguments are persuasive.
Yeah.
Hey, how are you guys?
Good. How are you?
Good. Is my audio okay? Sometimes my audio has problems.
It's fine. Just I just politely ask you to kind of dispense with the preamble and get on with the call because we're way over and we do have more calls to get to.
Okay. So the overview of the episode, I think, was something like, are apologetic arguments convincing? And that was the question that I saw in the chat. So, first of all, I have to assume that the showrunners didn't mean can they convince anyone, because obviously people are convinced by apologetics. It's whether or not they ought to be convincing, right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair interpretation. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you guys think? Have you guys ever come across the notion that like a person can have a separate, coherent structure of belief that is strictly devotional in their life, like one that they just use in a devotional, maybe church context, but that it coheres within its own structure. Like
but it doesn't. But it also. But you're saying it doesn't. It doesn't come into play in any other aspect of their life.
No, I think, people are going to be motivated, especially when it comes to beliefs, right? Like that they have about like how they ought to act and stuff like that. Moral beliefs. It's going to affect those things. But
so like, are you asking more if it's possible to have a belief system that is internally consistent?
Yeah. So if someone has an apologetic where certain things are taken to be axiomatic, like some people start with the assumption that things mean things and that's inherent in reality. That could lead you. There are apologetics that if you take that to be axiomatic, you could get to ideas about God being real based on that.
Yeah, I think there are definitely religious constructions that are internally consistent. I think the issue is that more often than not, right, it comes down to kind of one or two things that I seem to find a lot of times is that even if the religious system is internally consistent, it has axioms at the front that seemingly don't have any other connection to anything, right? Like there's all of these other axioms that, every other system seems to accept, including the non-religious ones. But then there's just these extra axioms out there that supposedly explain more of the world around us. And unfortunately, it just doesn't. And so then we just play the simple game of you have 5 axioms and I have 4, and we have the exact same explanatory power. Or the other side of it is the baggage later on down the road, where it's an internally consistent, system, right, of religious belief. But we've just got literal demonstrations on a regular basis that contradict it. So that's what I tend to find as being the problem. But yeah, I mean, is it possible to have a religious system that is internally consistent? I would say, yeah, it seems like that's true for me. Could I point one out, honestly, off the top of my head? No, I couldn't. But I feel like, yeah, the likelihood of there being one is up there. So
I think the common problem with apologetics, this is my best guess from talking to apologists, is that it attempts to step on other domains, right? Other than, this is my assessment. So like, it's sort of like flat earth, right? If you, the reason flat earth can't be logically consistent is because it's making a scientific claim and the science shows that the earth isn't flat, right? So like, if you're making a scientific claim and the science says otherwise, you're kind of in a pickle. But I don't think that the kinds of like arguments that you get, Plantinga and did I say his name? Plantinga? I don't know, that guy,
yeah, I know who we know.
Yeah. And Dr. Craig, I don't think that those are those kinds of apologetics are actually convincing to the majority of religious people. I doubt that they've even heard them because they're scientific in their nature. I think the number one apologetics people here are things like prime mover arguments, very basic versions of prime mover arguments. And those would be compelling. And they're compelling to me in a devotional context. I think they would be compelling to most people.
Okay, so we kind of I don't necessarily disagree that an apologetic argument can be persuasive to someone. The thing that kind of I'm interested in is whether they can demonstrate that God exists rather than just simply because, I accept that people believe things. That's not a problem for me, and I don't think it's a problem for, as far as I'm aware, many of the people in this community who are not believers do not have any problem with whatsoever with the fact that people can be convinced to believe something. The important thing is whether that thing is true. Now, in relation to apologetic arguments, what specifically about it, what is there that is out there that you find a good argument which convinces you that God actually exists? Rather than just convinces you to believe, but actually convinces you that God exists in and of himself. Because we can be convinced. We can have good reasons for being convinced about things which aren't true. For example, you could have a terrible car wreck and be brought back from the brink of death and be told that many people were praying for you, and that could convince you. That's a good reason. It's not a good reason to believe that God exists, but it is a good reason that informs belief as absent of other things. So if you're not sure aware of the kind of the medical intervention and whatnot, and that's the only information you've got, that can be a good reason to inform that belief. It is not a good reason for the argument that God actually exists. That's a separate thing. So what is it? What apologetic arguments are there that convince you that God actually exists?
Well, this is why I brought up the difference, I think, between what you might call, what's the word? What you might call I can't think of the word. Beliefs in the structure of empirical beliefs, right? Things that you're going to have direct empirical experience or direct empirical evidence to believe, and things you might believe devotionally. I think there are very strong apologetic arguments in the devotional sphere, right? Like have you ever heard the old joke, right? Look at the trees. They say, if you look at the trees, you'll see God. I don't think that's a bad argument at all. I think if you suspect or have an intuition that there is meaning in reality, and that the organization of things is more than random, that would be a very good reason to believe that there's a God.
Why? I mean, there's a if we come across a garden that looks well manicured and looks like there is a gardener there, and yet we sit and we wait, and no matter how long we wait, that gardener doesn't appear. Is the garden itself a good reason to believe that there is a gardener? Even if we do not see one, we see no evidence whatsoever of a gardener, is simply the presence of a garden which appears well manicured evidence of that gardener?
Well, I think that's exactly my point. It's going to depend on how you're looking at the garden. If you want to ask a question about what we can confirm to exist, using empirical data, and you care about that, and that's your mode of understanding, you're not going to be able to say that there's a gardener. But if what you care about is finding good explanations for your intuitions about the nature of gardens, it could be a good explanation.
But it's not evidence. I didn't ask about a good explanation for your intuitions. I asked about evidence. And it doesn't have to. And now, this can include proof. This, in fact, is a philosophical argument. It's not one that relies on empiricism. Yeah. It is a philosophical argument. Right. So, and where is the proof in that God, if the gardener never turns up, where is the proof So we can throw all empiricism aside. Where is the proof that God created that there is a gardener when their gardener never turns up?
There's a sort of assumption, I think, that doesn't match in this analogy, that doesn't match reality. I mean, it's the religious people I know and myself make the claim that we have had experiences of the gardener in this analogy, right?
Right, but your experience of the gardener is inconsistent with the other experiences with the gardener that people discuss. And if that's the case, then we have to have a set of criteria to determine which one of you is more accurate at the very least. Not saying that one of you is flat wrong or that one of you is 100% right, but just which one of you is more accurate. And if everybody is constantly giving inconsistent, explanations and descriptions, then it just seems, again, like I've said a couple of times this episode, it's just on shaky ground. It feels problematic because you come up to me and say, well, yeah, of course I saw the gardener. He's your typical, country bumpkin looking dude, somebody that probably lives, down in the South near SR. He's got the overalls and he's got the straw in his mouth. And the next person goes, oh, no, you're completely confused. Well, a really, really, well-dressed female. She's, got this beautiful white dress on, and, she's very, very soft spoken, very loving. So that's the problem. And like the information that is the same across all of these descriptions is insanely mundane. Like if we're already accepting we're talking about a gardener, then we're talking about a person. And so it's like, oh, cool, you guys all said it was a person, but the people you've individually described are vastly contradictory. So it still just seems.
On that note, Josh, I appreciate your call, but we are going to have to let you go.
Yeah,
please
back, Josh.
Do call back, because this has been a great conversation.
Seriously.
And I'd love to continue it. But thank you very much for your call. I am going to have to let you go. We are coming up to kind of hard stop time, unfortunately. This has been and I'm going to be very, very naughty for the second time tonight. A fucking brilliant show.
It really was.
It really has been very, very good.
Yeah.
So the prompt for this week is wrong answers only. Why did God really flood the earth? Reply in the comments and tune in at the beginning of next week's episode to hear the top 3 answers. Look, we have the love rings. Let's send them out. Let's get the love rings out there. SR, thank you for joining me. This has been amazing. As always, it's great fun and a massive pleasure and a massive honor working with you. I do appreciate it. There is going to be an ACD Discord after show if you want to see more of me and SR tonight. And get yourself over to the Atheist Community of Austin's Discord server, and we will be there. If you don't believe, this is your community, and we do appreciate you being here. And even if you do believe, we appreciate you being here. And if you do believe, we don't hate you.
We're just not convinced.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live, Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242, or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.